Today, we have an incredibly accomplished guest whose career spans over 35 years across some of the biggest names in the business: Hindustan Unilever, PepsiCo, Whirlpool, Reliance Capital, and the Times Group. Sir, we welcome you. Mr. Sunder Hemrajani has held leadership roles across sales, marketing, and general management, playing a key role in launching the Whirlpool brand in India and leading PepsiCo's bottling operations in North and East India. He retired as Managing Director of Times Innovative Media Limited and now serves as a management consultant, senior advisor, and board member for multiple companies. Beyond the corporate world, Mr. Hemrajani has been deeply involved in academia, serving as a guest faculty at his alma mater, the Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi, for over 16 years. He is also a Harvard Business School alumnus and an author of two books, Beyond the Mountains, Overcoming the Challenges Within, inspired by his trekking experience, and Born Again, A Modernized Journey, which reflects on his personal and professional growth. We are thrilled to have him here today to talk about leadership, marketing, and his incredible journey in the retail space of India. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me, Ranjana. It's always a pleasure to come back to the alma mater, which is FMS. I was here as a student in 79, then as an alumnus,
Right.
and I was also a recruiter for Hindustan Unilever, PepsiCo, Whirlpool, and Times. And then I was invited to be a guest faculty for some of the marketing electives, including retailing management. And I taught here for about 16 years. So I'm now here as a sort of a part of your podcast. So it's great to be here, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. Before we get into the specifics of retail, we want to start with a broader perspective. You have seen the Indian business transform over the last couple of decades. How would you describe the journey of retail in India?
Yeah, sure. Worldwide, retail has always been driven by private capital. And the significant drivers of retail have been social, in a way, economic, technological, and environmental. And that's worldwide. Yeah. And what's different about India is that it started slowly, and I'm going back to when I was growing up, to 60s and 70s, and now it's picking up pace. What I plan to do today is to cover this in 4 phases. I'll give a brief overview of the retail situation here, and then we will then, I'll go through various decades of evolution and revolution. The topic I had selected was India Retail Evolution or Revolution. So I think I'll cover that phase right up till today. And so that's how I plan to do. And so I hope it's okay. It's a very vast subject, so it's not very easy to cover it in about 30 or 30 minutes to an hour.
Right. Understood, sir. I feel our generation was not even born back in the day, but or in fact for most of the listeners of this podcast as well. But let's take a step back to the 60s and 70s. What was the retail landscape like back then?
See, if you look at retail right from, say, independence and even before that, it was basically general trade, the entire retail system. The evolution of modern retail was started sometime in the 60s. And I think this was triggered by the economic events of the 60s and the 70s. And the first step which the government and cooperatives took, was to intervene in retail, because there was this benefits of green revolution of the 60s. The benefits had to be passed on to consumers. So that was the first trigger. The other trigger, which was equally relevant, was the OPEC oil shock of the 70s, when the oil producing countries hiked their oil rates, which resulted in high inflation.
Right.
And a government which was basically committed to Garibi Hatao had to take some steps to ensure that the common man got the goods which were the of daily consumption at controlled prices. So this was an intervention by the government,
Right.
and you had Super Bazaar, Kendriya Bandar, all government ventures, and in Bombay you had Sarkari Bandar. They were all started to make sure that the prices were controlled. And so this is what the trigger was. But some of these ventures really lost their momentum because of poor management, because it was being managed by the government. There were a whole lot of issues. And so that's what happened. The private capital didn't come in till virtually 80s. Yeah. You had odd Vivek and Company in the south, in Chennai, which was into consumer durables and consumer electronics. And then you had Nilgiri in Bangalore. But it was very insignificant,
Right.
which hampered the growth of retail during that period. Now, if you look at, as I mentioned earlier, worldwide, it is the social, economic, technological, and environmental changes which have driven the growth of retail. In India, if you look at the demographics, you have a situation where, and this has been over decades, there's a growing urbanization. More and more people coming from rural to urban areas, which is resulting in a high uh, consumer universe in urban areas. Yeah. Although that is also restricted to the top 75 odd cities, which contribute, I would say, more than 50% of that consuming universe. The second change which is happening at the demographic level is the youth. More than 50% of the population in India, right, is under 35 years of age. So, and youth are, I would call them early adapters of any change which happens. So that's a second change which is happening. And there's increase in working women. You have the couple, both man and wife, they work. So that has led to an increase in the convenience packaged goods industry. Yeah, and indeed has impacted retail as well. And then what I would call, see, I grew up in a joint family, but over a period of time, there are nuclear families. You work somewhere, you have to go there.
Yeah.
The joint family system, by and large, broke up and gave rise to this nuclear families and single male households, which resulted in a growth of out of home consumption. Yeah, and food retail, which is really flourishing today. The other changes which happened was psychographic and lifestyle changes. When the discretionary income grew, people really wanted to aspire to higher lifestyle. And this resulted in the growth of indulgence products, growth of shopping locations, the malls. I mean, so that was driven by, as I said, aspiration to higher lifestyle. Then, back in the days when I was growing up, you had in the families, the thinking was we must save money. There was a saving mindset because we want to give good education to our children. So there was a saving mindset. Now, if you look at the growth of the credit card companies, it's now the spending mindset. You don't even have the money and you want to spend. So that's the second change which has happened, which has driven this retail as well. And there is greater receptivity to leisure activities, to recreation. So you have more multiplexes, more money being spent on entertainment. And lastly, I would say there is this whole discerning consumer, who wants variety, he's well informed. So I think some of these factors, changes which have happened have driven the retail industry in India. And when I see the landscape today, it's significantly different from the 60s and the 70s. And so let me come now to what happened in 60s and 70s. It was a protectionist economy. The duties were high, you know, imports were very expensive, there were price controls, there was a licensing regime. And I must tell you this, when I was at FMS, I did my internship, in a company called ACC, Associated Cement Company. I went to Bombay and did internship in the cement marketing division of ACC. And those days, cement was in short supply and the prices were controlled. In fact, there used to be an office of Cement Controller of India. So if you wanted to build a house, you had to go and get a permit. And then you go to the company shop and they'll give you the thing, you have to show the permit. So when I went to cement marketing division of ACC, so I asked for a project. And you know what they told me? He says, Sundar, it's all controlled. There is no marketing to be done. All that you have to do is these people come with permits and you have to basically, it's a supply side which has to get better. They know. So fortunately, they gave me a project on their refractories, where the prices were not controlled and they were driving it. So I did that project there. And I would say what changed during that time, actually the high inflation. I think overall industry, the people were very reluctant to invest in retail because real estate costs were high, supply chain costs were high. So you found that there was a great reluctance to invest. There was no private investment. And that's something which changed in the 80s and the 90s.
So that was quite a fascinating period with the mushrooming of all these small department stores and private supermarkets. What were the key drivers to change during the next phase, the phase two?
Well, I think what changed, I think the key drivers broadly were all in the area of social, economic, technological, and environmental changes. I think the main thing which changed in the 80s, one, was that there was a rural boom. There was the rural economy is dependent on monsoons and how monsoons shape up. And there were 4 or 5 or 6, in fact, continuous good monsoons, which led to bumper harvest, more discretionary income in the hands of the rural folk, and that also impacted the urban areas because a lot of money was coming into urban areas. So I think that was a significant shift which happened. And the second one which happened was the private investment started coming in. And you had first few players who came in. There were more private supermarkets who came in, one-off supermarkets. And I remember there was a transition. Even the Kirana tried to transition to some sort of a self-service sort of a Kirana, where they, even in the small place they had the consumer going and walking across 2, 3 aisles and picking up stuff. So that was a transition, and there were one-off single standalone supermarkets which came up across South. And I think that carried on till some of the big groups came in. And I would say the first groups in this was basically RPG. They came in, and I think they sort of, once they came in, then afterwards there was, I would say, the Bayani, Kishore Bayani, he came in. And then it was Big Bazaar, and then you had some of the big corporates, like towards the end of this phase, end of 90s, you had corporates like Reliance came in, and then Tata's came in through Trent. So now suddenly there was you can call it a corporatization of retail, which was good for retail because private capital came in, and I think suddenly the retail exploded. And I think it's a fascinating the way it changed. And so when I look back, I think that was a defining time, corporatization. Without private capital, there is no way we could have moved forward. In fact, I would say there was a launch of, some of these real estate guys like K. Rahejas came in with Shoppers Stop. Then you had specialty retail like Music World and Tanishq, Tata's brand, and Health and Glow and Crossword, the bookstore.
Yes.
And then you had Subiksha, which was a discount brand, but poorly managed and hence shut shop, because of poor management. So I think there were a lot of changes which happened. Significantly, these changes were again driven by a changing consumer. The consumer who was used to buying from the Kirana store continued to buy what you can call, top up sort of a situation and unplanned purchase. You want a loaf of bread or whatever. You are likely to go to a supermarket. And the consumer was also transitioning. Some of them, like the working couple, they decided to plan it. So once in a fortnight or once in a month, they'll go and pick up stuff from supermarkets because it offered better value, or hypermarkets. But the consumer was also transitioning. So for unplanned top-up requirement, and I would say low shelf life products like loaf of bread and all that, they still went to their Kirana, but for most of their stuff, they would go to a supermarket. So the consumer behavior also changed as these options became available. And for high value products, high involvement products, I would say they would go, for example, if you wanted to buy a television or you wanted to buy a refrigerator, consumer durable, high involvement product, you will still go to a big store because you'll get a better price there. Right. So that's the way that there was a consumer behavior shift also which happened at that time.
So along with the shift in the consumer behavior, the reforms of 1991 would have also created some kind of an impact on the functioning. How did these economic shift impact the retail space?
Oh, hugely. In fact, the reforms of 1991, basically pioneered by Prime Minister Rao and his finance minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, made a huge impact. Suddenly there was ease of doing business. We were a protectionist economy, we were transiting, and suddenly they opened up the whole economy, and you had foreign brands who came in, IKEA, Whirlpool, LG, Samsung, large number of brands, came in, and some of them set up their own retail outlets. See, they were exclusive retail outlets. I think LG set it up, IKEA set up, because it impacts the image. To build, image for the brand, they came up with this exclusive sort of outlets. And so that also altered the landscape suddenly. And when you have global players come in, whether in manufacturing or, otherwise, you find that it is going to impact because there is more money coming in. Right. So they came in, and I think there were a lot of other brands who also came, and it made a huge impact to the retail industry. More options became available, better quality. I mean, I worked with Whirlpool, and so I can tell you the quality they brought to the table compared to the earlier brand was significantly better. So you had the latest technology coming in some of these segments, consumer electronics, the right. Color televisions, the LEDs and LCDs and all that. So I think that made a huge difference. And in addition, there was this telecom boom. You had the Hutch and the BPL, and which also spurred growth of handsets. You had the Nokia, Motorola and Ericsson and several other brands which came in. So that also sort of, the retail industry got that impetus from all these entries and multiple brands available. I think it helped the retail industry. And towards the end of 90s, Tata's and Reliance came in, and they obviously, took it forward. But they were, I would say, capability challenges. And I can tell you, in Whirlpool, we had the washing machine and we had the refrigerator. Now, refrigerator was a pull product, right? If you don't have a refrigerator, your milk will go bad, etc. You had to buy one. But washing machines those days, I'm talking about the 90s, right. was still a push product because there was a maid at home, and labor costs were low, so she would wash clothes. But once, so to handle both product categories, we really learned from, I would say, we made mistakes, but we learned from those. We, trained the sales team to sell push product. You can't just leave it in the store and vanish. And we put some demonstrators and all that in store to make sure they pushed and gave demos to consumers. Today it's a pull product, so the labor costs are so high. Things have changed. So that was a capability challenge. The other challenge, which even companies like Levers faced, was you have what 300-400 stock keeping units. Now you're dealing with a supermarket. Now if you do not, if your stock is not there on the shelf, you lose the sale to competition. Yeah, if we come all the way in buying everything, if your brand is not available, they'll pick up some other brand.
Right.
Yeah. So we had to change, I would say, the service model. A separate vertical for modern trade, modern retail was created, where a person from the service provider will visit the outlet every day and check what stock keeping units are not available. And they would then place the order immediately and they'll be filled up.
Okay.
We faced the same thing in PepsiCo. Yeah. And when new players come in, like when Metro came in, cash and carry, they were selling to retailers.
Yeah.
Now they told us this 24 bottle, this thing won't do. So we want PET bottles, a 6-pack. So we had to create a packaging unit outside the factory for Metro to make sure we gave them the stock keeping unit which they wanted, and their customers wanted that. So these are the changes in terms of service requirement of these were very different. They were very demanding. I mean, apart from the pricing negotiation which happened, but otherwise, and discounts and all, they'll ask for more discounts. Areas like fill rate became important because they would say, listen, you're not supplying and we're losing sale. Yeah, and the companies realize that if the customer doesn't buy your brand, it's not available, they'll buy some other brand. So I think there were the capability challenges, and I would say the growth even during this phase was hampered by regulatory issues and poor management, because the industry had to build capability and it was taking time. And regulatory issues, let me narrate this incident. Raghu Pillai was a good friend of mine. He was the managing director of the RPG retail vertical. Yeah, so once I met him at a seminar. So I asked him, and they were at that time, and I think in South and I think Bombay and maybe a couple of other cities. So I asked him, why are you not coming to Delhi? It's an obvious market. The super bazaars and Kendriya Bandars are poorly managed. Most of the time, they don't have stock keeping units. He says, Sundar, you don't realize it. If I have to open one outlet in Delhi, I'll need 37 permissions. This is back in the days in 90s. He says, I can't afford it. 37 permissions. I'll have to. And so regulatory framework was also an issue. It hampered the growth of the retail at that time.